and speak. What? I got your gun.
There are television shows, and then there are phenomena. Star Trek sits firmly in the second category, a franchise so deeply woven into the cultural fabric of the last 6 decades that it has influenced everything from scientific terminology to the design of actual technology used by NASA. Millions of people have watched the original series, memorized Spock's eyebrow raises, quoted Kirk's speeches, and debated the finer points of Starfleet regulations in online forums at 2 in the morning. And yet, for all that devotion, for all those rewatches and anniversary marathons and collector's edition box sets, there are things hiding in plain sight that even the most dedicated fans have never consciously noticed. That is the fascinating paradox of Star Trek. The more you love it, the more you watch it, and the more you watch it, the more you become absorbed in the story itself, the diplomacy, the moral dilemmas, the alien encounters, and the less you notice the seams holding the whole magnificent illusion together. The production team of the original series, working under the relentless pressure of tight television schedules and budgets that would make modern streaming executives laugh, were forced to be extraordinarily creative. They repurposed everyday objects. They hid personal histories behind camera angles. They wrote inside jokes into the set design that have gone unread by audiences for 50 years. They worked through the night, improvised solutions on the fly, and somehow produced one of the most enduring works of popular science fiction ever made. What follows is a journey behind the transporter room doors, past the warp core and the GNDN-labeled pipes, and into the hidden corners of the USS Enterprise that most viewers have sailed right past without a second glance. Some of these details are funny. Some are genuinely moving. And some reveal just how much ingenuity was required to make the future look believable on a shoestring budget. So settle in, because you are about to see Star Trek in a way you never quite have before. Let's begin with one of the most quietly poignant secrets in the entire run of the original series. A secret that was never hidden for vanity, but for dignity. James Doohan, the Canadian actor who brought Chief Engineer Montgomery Scott to life with such warm authority and comic timing, was missing the middle finger of his right hand. Most viewers who watched the show casually never noticed. Even many dedicated fans, aware of the fact, would struggle to point to a specific moment where the absence becomes visible, because the production team worked so carefully to conceal it. Doohan lost the finger during the Second World War. He served as a lieutenant in the Royal Canadian Artillery and was among the soldiers who landed at Juno Beach on D-Day, June 6, 1944. In the chaos of the Normandy landings, he was struck by multiple bullets, 4 in his leg, 1 deflected away from his chest by a silver cigarette case he carried, and 1 that took his right middle finger entirely. He received commendations for his conduct that day and carried the physical evidence of that service for the rest of his life. When he came to portray Scotty, a character who spent an enormous amount of screen time working with his hands at engineering consoles, the challenge of concealment fell to the production team. Their solution was elegant in its simplicity. Doohan was positioned so that his left hand was most often visible during close-up technical work. Camera operators developed a habit of framing him from his left side. When both hands needed to appear on screen simultaneously, hand doubles stepped in for tighter shots. The prop department quietly designed certain pieces of equipment that could be operated in ways that naturally kept his right hand partially obscured. It was a collective, unspoken act of professional courtesy that persisted through the entire run of the show, and it worked so seamlessly that audiences spent years watching Scotty save the Enterprise without ever noticing that the miracle worker was quietly concealing a war wound every single day on set. Here is a question worth asking yourself the next time you watch the original series. When alien characters pour drinks from those elegant, oddly-shaped containers sitting on tables across the galaxy, does anything about those bottles seem vaguely familiar? If you are a collector of American whiskey, the answer might suddenly come to you. The production team on the original series had limited resources and unlimited need for props that looked exotic and otherworldly. Their solution, on more than one occasion, was to look at what was already available and ask a different question. Not what does this look like, but what could this become? The distinctive bottles used throughout the series to represent Saurian brandy, one of the most frequently referenced alien beverages in the franchise, were originally 1964 commemorative bottles produced by George Dickel Tennessee Whiskey. The bottles had an unusual powder horn shape that made them stand out from conventional glass containers, and with minimal modification, primarily repainting and relabeling, they transformed convincingly into the kind of exotic alien glassware that suggested centuries of interstellar trade routes and distant civilizations. Both lighter and darker glass variants appeared across different episodes, though collectors who have sought out the originals tend to consider the lighter brown version more faithful to what appeared on screen. The bottles became so associated with the show that surviving examples in good condition are now sought by two distinct communities: Star Trek enthusiasts and bourbon collectors, creating a peculiar overlap in the antique market that Gene Roddenberry almost certainly never anticipated. The whiskey bottle trick was not an isolated incident. It reflects a broader philosophy of prop creation that ran through the entire original series. Salt shakers became Dr. McCoy's medical instruments. Household appliances were rearranged, painted, and relabeled to become ship's equipment. Packaging materials reappeared as control panels. The team was essentially doing what artists have always done, finding the extraordinary inside the ordinary, except they were doing it on deadline, for network television, every single week. Not all of Star Trek's hidden details require a close examination of the physical set. Some of them are written right there in the opening credits, if you know what you are looking for and understand what they meant. The relationship between William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy was one of the great professional partnerships in television history, but it was not without its tensions, and nowhere was that tension more precisely, almost comically, documented than in the typographical requirements of their contracts. Nimoy's billing agreement contained a specific provision requiring that his credit appear at a size no less than 75% of the size afforded to Shatner. This was not approximate or general. It was a precise percentage, written into the contract and enforced with enough rigor that production office memos specifically referenced it when discussing credit changes. Beginning with the fourth episode to air, the credits were adjusted to reflect this arrangement, and internal documentation was explicit about the ceiling as well as the floor. Nimoy's credit was to be no more than 75% of Shatner's type size. The reason this detail matters beyond simple Hollywood gossip is what it reveals about the power dynamics and professional relationships that shaped the show. Both actors had what is known in contract law as a favored nations clause, requiring that they receive equal treatment in key categories: equal pay, equal consideration. Yet the credit size provision created a hierarchy within that nominal equality, a way of formally acknowledging Shatner's top billing while still protecting Nimoy's status as the second lead. The tension this represented did not dissolve when the original series ended. It persisted into the film era, most notably when Nimoy was given the opportunity to direct one of the Star Trek features, a development that prompted Shatner to invoke his favored nations clause and demand a similar directorial opportunity, which eventually came. Meanwhile, in the same memos that so carefully calibrated the precise typographical relationship between the two stars, there were notes about other cast members receiving better credit treatment than their contracts technically required, an almost charming inconsistency that suggests the billing wars were intensely personal rather than purely procedural. The Klingons are among the most iconic alien races in science fiction history. Their appearance, imposing, armored, radiating a kind of brutal authority, helped define the visual language of the hostile alien for an entire generation of viewers. The costumes contributed enormously to that impression. And hidden within those costumes, painted and strategically positioned to suggest militaristic alien technology, was ordinary bubble wrap. The first significant appearance of this material came in the first season episode Errand of Mercy, where actor John Colicos appeared as Klingon Commander Kor. His costume incorporated a painted strip of bubble wrap used as a belt component. The costume department referred to the material by its commercial name, Sealed Air, and the choice was not simply a matter of cutting costs. Costume designer Bill Tice articulated a clear artistic philosophy behind decisions like this one. His approach to creating futuristic or alien materials involved deliberately using contemporary objects out of their normal context, because displacement itself created a sense of foreignness. A material that the audience might unconsciously half recognize, stripped of its usual associations and placed in an unfamiliar visual context, could suggest alien origin more powerfully than something entirely invented. Tice was right, and the evidence is in the decades it took for viewers to identify what they were actually looking at. The bubble wrap, painted and incorporated into the broader costume design, looked so naturally at home in its science fiction context that it never broke the illusion. When fans eventually identified it, The reaction was not disappointment but something closer to delight, a recognition of how thoroughly the production team's creative logic had worked, and how much the show had accomplished with so little. The first alien starship ever encountered in the Star Trek franchise was enormous, intimidating, and constructed from a combination of plaster and ping-pong balls. The Fesarius, the vessel that confronted the Enterprise in the Corbomite maneuver, was a model built around a sphere covered with hemispherical shapes that gave it a distinctive clustered, almost organic appearance. Production records indicate that the construction involved ping-pong balls cut in half and adhered to a base structure, creating the visual texture that made the ship look genuinely alien rather than like a conventional rocket or saucer design. The model was enhanced with a lighting system that allowed it to pulse, suggesting internal power and life. Achieving this effect proved technically demanding enough that it significantly affected the production schedule. The Corbomite maneuver was actually completed before several other first-season episodes but aired later because of the complexity of its visual effects sequences. The effects work was done at the Howard Anderson Company and ultimately cost over $17,000, a substantial sum for a single episode's effects in mid-1960s television production. When CBS Digital undertook the task of remastering the original series in the mid-2000s, creating CGI replacements for the original model effects, the team working on the Fesarius made a deliberate choice to remain faithful to the original design. The new version added detail that the original model's budget and construction methods couldn't achieve, but the fundamental visual concept, that strange, spherical, nodular appearance, was preserved as a conscious act of respect for what the original team had created.